Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, it is time to talk about the Ohio State-Indiana game, but I know everyone right now is going, that's old news. We watched that already. I know we didn't get to watch it. So Tony and I always find that we learn something by rewatching it. But normally we're looking more back at that game. We're going to try and make this a little more about, okay, here's what we learned and here's what it means for this weekend, because we know the game is coming.
It's absolutely on its way, and everything that we do here is somehow, some way pointing always towards the Michigan game and how it will apply there. And so, we watch the game and have that in mind. One of the things, Tom, that I'll just start with is I mentioned this on a previous show about how the sideline access now with the cameras on Fox that we have, and you can see from the players and their reactions and things. I had no idea about the Signetti, the Will Howard cigarette celebration, or the things that he was doing about putting up the cigarette. And right before that, he saw him typing into the camera going, "Google me." So my main thought as I'm watching that is, if things are going well for Ohio State next week, what kind of sideline is going to be going on there?
Well, I had the same thought actually, and we if you've seen, Michigan has the turnover. They call them buffs. It's just like a case of like sunglasses, and you put on your sunglasses and you take a picture when you get a turnover. Tony, would it absolutely floor you if Ohio State had some sunglasses on the sideline? Really completely shock you if there were sunglasses on the sideline? It wouldn't. I'm not expecting it, but I also wouldn't be like, what? Never. You don't want to do that in the first quarter, but if it's the fourth quarter, like you could see that. This is one where for years and years and years, everyone said, listen, it's the rivalry. We respect our opponent. This is, it's the greatest rivalry because of both teams. And so you have to respect. There were questions last year about respect from both teams. Mm-hmm. And everyone sort of answered well, I don't want to say everyone answered the question. Everyone said words after the questions were asked, and none of them were yes. So yeah, Michigan has a new head coach, but it's also the same head coach who was on the sidelines last year. I'm guessing Ohio State players and coaches remember some of the Michigan players and coaches running over and, sort of taunting them as they were leaving the field, which, again, that's fine. Like, that's 100% okay. This goes back to the Curt Signetti thing where it's like, you want to talk your mm-hmm. stuff over the summer. Absolutely. But then you don't get to piss and moan if someone kind of rubs it back in your face. It's 100% fine. You want to talk your stuff. You want to taunt people. Like, that's fine. Like, that's kind of part of the game. And I know sportsmanship, yada, yada, yada. But, at a certain point, like when you're not playing T-ball anymore, like it does become part of the game. But Ryan Day doesn't get to piss and moan if someone scores a late touchdown on them, because Ryan Day just did it to Curt Signetti, mm-hmm. who did it to Western Illinois. So Curt Signetti doesn't get to piss and moan about it either. So, long answer short, Tony. Well, I guess short answer long in this case. Yeah, I would be. I'm very interested to see what happens on the sidelines during any point during the game. Tony, how about this? Are you going to see binoculars? Are you going to see a binocular celebration or goggles or, Tony, these teams have plenty of material to work with over the years.
Yeah, that was one that I was thinking of as well. Wouldn't shock me if there's some binoculars, but we're presuming Ohio State is going to have enough success to act out, and the game still has to be played. Speaking of games that were played, Ohio State 38-15 over Indiana. I was kind of annoyed that our buddy Tim May was telling me that I picked Ohio State to win like 31-15. He's like, I don't know why I went with 15. I just did. And then we got to see it come to fruition. I'm like, gosh, dang it, Tim. First Buster Douglas, and now 15 points by an opponent. Like, what is that? But mainly when I'm watching this game, I'm watching Carson Hinsman, who I thought had a pretty good day, and knowing that it's going to be much more difficult next week. But I thought this was a good Indiana defensive line that he held up well. He was getting into the second level a lot in the run game. He was doing well in pass protection when he had somebody to block. So I was encouraged by what I saw. The PFF grades, the initial PFF grades are like, I don't know, mixed. But what I'm seeing is a guy that was comfortable. I know the Fox guys were talking about the snaps are kind of wonky here and there, but overall, I think everybody leaves encouraged by Carson Hinsman, by Austin Seerveld and their performances. You go back to the TreVeyon Henderson touchdown run on, I think, third down. They went behind those guys and they made the push. And it's plays like that will give everybody confidence going into this Michigan game and against that Michigan defensive front. And Ohio State didn't look overmatched. Not that they ever should against Indiana, and not that they should against Michigan, because really these are all the same talent pool that these two schools are recruiting from. So I feel like Ohio State is encouraged by what they saw on Saturday.
Yeah, I think you're not going to see quite as much push against Michigan, but if you got multiple yards of push against Indiana, and you can just kind of get a stalemate, if the Ohio State offensive line cannot lose the game for them, and I think they're probably going to not lose the game for them, then that puts Ohio State in a pretty good spot, because that's one of the ways that Michigan could potentially control the game. If they can really dominate the Ohio State offensive line, get a ton of pressure on Will Howard, get that ball out quickly, not let Ohio State establish the run, that's how you keep this game close for 3 or 4 quarters and maybe, pull it out in the end. If the Ohio State offensive line can just be okay, just be solid, they should be in decent shape, just because that takes away so much of Michigan's potential game plan to beat them. I think from what I saw I think that's going to be something that I think the offensive line can do that. It was not perfect. There was certainly some stuff. You saw Tigger Shabola get beaten a couple times. And there was some weird stuff too, where it's 4th and 1 and they're in shotgun and they're not, they didn't have Will Howard go under center. And then they did have him go under center later. I think it was also on a 4th down, but they threw a pass to Emeka Egbuka there. So, do they feel like Carson Hinsman can get the push on a quarterback sneak on 4th and 1? We don't know, because either they don't, or they were just not going to show Michigan how Carson Hinsman does on a 4th and 1 under center quarterback sneak kind of situation. We don't have a big enough sample size to be able to kind of give you an official answer there. But I thought that was something that I noticed early on, and Joel Klatt said, I think on the broadcast that, maybe it's a snap issue, but then they put him up under center later and they didn't have any snapping issues. So.
And they went with a sneak late in the game, at the end of the game as well.
At the very, very end of the game. That's I
think there's just a concern. Let's get them going before we do it right away in the first 4th down on that second drive, because I think we were all like, why aren't you sneaking this? And it's like, maybe that's what it was.
Yeah. And, later that's obviously a pretty low stakes moment of the game, other than the fact that you really look like kind of a goofball if you're trying to score and can't score at that moment. Other than that, it's, in terms of win expectancy, it doesn't really move the needle at all, whether you get in or not. So yeah, I broadly speaking, I feel like the Ohio State offensive line is in a decent spot here. This is obviously going to be by far the toughest test they've gotten the last 3 weeks, but Saturday against Indiana was probably the toughest test they've gotten in that 3-week span of Purdue and Northwestern and Indiana. So, things are only going to get tougher for that offensive line, but feels like so far so good.
What do you got?
Let's see. How about Will Howard? We talked about this briefly on the post-game show, but started 14 for 14. And it wasn't way downfield. He didn't throw a lot of stuff way downfield, but it was like 8 yards per attempt, something like that. That's not bad. And the throw to Emeka Egbuka, that was the 14th of those 14 throws. That touchdown was tipped. I didn't realize that touchdown got tipped by the defensive back. That was a tight window. I thought Howard was impressive. I thought Igbinosun's concentration to the ball gets tipped right before it gets to you. That's like what goalies in hockey are absolutely terrified of is, you get the slap shot from the point. Okay, I got it. And then there's a guy 3 feet in front of me who deflects it with a stick, and now it's going a different direction. That makes it almost impossible to stop. Igbinosun to have the concentration to bring that in was really, really impressive. But Howard, I thought that was just a great example of Howard doing what they need Howard to do. They don't need him to throw for 500 yards. They don't need him to put up, 150 rushing yards. They just need him to run sometimes. He didn't really run at all on Saturday. He will this weekend, I'm going to guess. But they need him to just be efficient, get the ball out, get the ball to your playmakers, because as soon as you can take Michigan's defensive line out of the sort of equation, get it out, and then they're chasing downfield. Kenneth Grant is not probably chasing too many people down the field 60 yards. He might have done that once this year. I think I remember him doing that in one of the games early in the year. He's probably not running down Jeremiah Smith 40 yards down the field. So if you can get the ball out and just get it out, get it in a place where guys can catch it and do something with it, that feels like that's really what they really need out of him this weekend, and you saw it against Indiana.
Talking about Will Howard, when Ryan Day decided to go for it on 4th and 1 or 2 from the 50, did you see the camera hit Will Howard? He just had this smirk on his face, and you could just, it just feels like the team is embracing and reflecting the Ryan Day's aggressive energy right now, and maybe since the Oregon game. And even then they were swinging away in that one. So he's been pretty adamant about that and the whole leaving no doubt thing. And yeah, sure, you're going to get criticized for it, but you're going to punch it in because at the end of the game, you want to leave no doubt and you don't care about anybody else's feelings. As they keep saying, it's about us. It's not about anybody else. And so they're not worried about Indiana's feelings on that one. And so you're just seeing the team reflect that and rally around it. And I guess that's probably also indicative of some of the celebrating that we saw with the Cignetti stuff from Will Howard. But Will Howard fired up all throughout this game. We've seen that throughout the season. I think we all thought, if you can, I remember saying it at the start of the season, if you can get Kyle McCord's numbers with some rushing, you would take that from Will Howard. And he's been so much more. I didn't know he could throw the ball as accurately as he has. The only Ohio State quarterback to ever complete 80% of his passes in more than 6 games. And he's done that this season. And he's going to leave here as, well, let's see how the rest of the season goes. But right now, would you have, Ohio State fans really, I believe, love him. And media, having talked to him, this is a guy that is easy to respect, and you can see what all of this means to him and what this opportunity means to him. And he's having a good time out there. And it was just one little smirk that I caught, and I thought that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and I think they talked about this, one of them on the broadcast, one of the announcers talked about just the fact that Ohio State is comfortable being uncomfortable at this point. They have had to do some of the difficult work already. They had to go on the road to Oregon and went punch for punch with Oregon. They had to go on the road to Penn State and beat Penn State. So by the time you get to an Indiana game, this is the biggest game in the history of Indiana's football program. Mm-hmm. And it's just this is the third most challenging game on the Ohio State schedule so far. And they've won one, and they, coulda, woulda, shoulda, almost won the other one. And just Will Howard is, I think, a different player now than he was when he got to Ohio State, because he didn't necessarily do all of this at Kansas State last year. They had talked about sort of cleaning up his footwork and some mechanics and that kind of stuff at one point, which I think has improved his accuracy and improved his arm strength and all that kind of stuff. But I think it's also just the guys around him and the coaching staff around him. He probably did not have a Chip Kelly, Ryan Day offensive coaching staff last year. He certainly did not have a Jeremiah Smith or Carnell Tate or Emeka Igbinosun or TreVeyon Henderson or Quinshon Judkins around him. That all of that kind of breeds more confidence, and he has had to face kind of difficult moments at times, but they've gotten through them for the most part. And so The only time that they fell short was he could have slid 1 second sooner. Like, that's it. That's what failure has looked like for Will Howard this year. So you would expect him to be feeling pretty good about things because he's been tested and he's met the test.
I'll say, Tom, you say he could have slid 1 second sooner. I would say the Big Ten could have done what the Big 12 did by replaying and then kicking everybody off the field in the Arizona State BYU game. That's what the Big Ten could have done rather than doing what they did, which was, we've got a plane to catch. We got to get back to Chicago. The steakhouse is waiting. So the Big Ten could have done more, but as we're learning, the Big Ten could always do more, and they only do it against Davison and Igbinosun.
All right, so let's talk about Davison and Igbinosun. We talked about him a little bit yesterday. There were 2 pass interference calls on him on the first drive. They were both legitimate calls. The call later on in the game in the end zone was also a legitimate call. Got there early, absolutely. But it's like, every holding call that gets called is pretty much a legitimate call, but you're not calling anything else. At one point, I think Klatt said that the officiating crew had a reputation for being flag happy, and it was like, well, situationally, I guess, but he needs to really figure it out, because at this point, if you can't get through the Michigan game without getting called for pass interference, I think there's a problem. I think they're going to need to make an adjustment.
Yeah, you shouldn't. There's not enough downfield passing for Michigan that you should be grabbing and holding. You should simply just be tackling once they catch the ball, or keeping them from catching the ball at the 4 yards downfield or whatever. And you saw after, I think maybe I don't know if it was the second one or the third one. I get confused. Probably the last one, where there was just, you see like this kind of smile, like, is there a confidence issue? Like he looked over to the sideline, and he just looked a little concerned. And for a cornerback, that is concerning. Whereas as he lost his confidence, is there something, you're not supposed to have any memory. You're supposed to just be able to move on. Is he able to move on right now? And based on that, I think it's good that they put Jermaine Matthews out there and they can rotate. That way it allows everybody to kind of recalibrate on the sideline. It gives IGB an opportunity to just watch and what did you do wrong? This is what I did wrong. This is what you need to do right, and get that coaching from Tim Walton. So that is a good thing for Ohio State to have Jermaine Matthews there. And he played better this week than he did the week before. And you would expect that he can just continue to play. They have all of the confidence in the world in him, just as they do IGB. But now he's going to continue to be targeted, and their teams are going to force him to just play straight up. And if he can't, then the refs are going to call it, and refs will continue to call it. He's been the most penalized defensive player in America, and I don't think that's going to stop. And they want him to continue to play aggressively, but there's aggressive and there's cheating, and what he's been doing has been cheating.
Yeah, and at this point, we've talked about this before, but the officials are looking for it. Everyone knows, the opposing teams know. That's why they're going after him. The officiating crews, in some cases, have done these games and know. In other cases, I'm sure, they review these calls and all that kind of stuff, and you see that stuff show up on tape. And I'm sure when you're having the pregame conversation with opposing coaches, they're saying, "Hey, watch out for number one. He gets a little grabby sometimes." So this is not a secret. And I would love to say, boy, maybe it's just reputational, but all the calls, as I said earlier, have been legitimate. It hasn't been, you're probably getting, lots of people on the highway were speeding, but when they pulled you over, you also were speeding. So you can't say, I wasn't speeding. You were speeding. Other people were maybe going faster than you, or also over the speed limit, but you're the one who got pulled over, and other people were doing it is not actually a defense in your case. So yeah, it's something that he's got to figure out. And I would find it hard to believe that he's not thinking about it when he's out there. And it feels like you should be able to just know, hey, I have to play really conservatively here, but that is very clearly not his nature. He has
Mhm.
always been a very physical corner, and how effective will he be if he goes out there and is like, well, I'm not going to touch. I'm not going to, forget the boxing gloves. I'm not going to, have any kind of contact at all. You see corners all the time with contact, and sometimes it's just kind of like you grab you're not going up with the arm. You kind of just like subtly grabbing an arm, or you're grabbing a jersey where it's not real obvious. I don't know that he can even get away with that stuff at this point because people are just looking for it so much.
Well, and we've seen Jeremiah Smith be interfered with and it not get called. You've seen this week a lot of the discussion about how Ohio State their opponents are the least penalized nationally. Ohio State's opponents are penalized, I think, just 2.6 times in conference games. So 2 to 3 penalties per game for Ohio State's opponents when those opponents are playing the best opponent they've seen all season long, and they're able to play some of their cleanest games all season long. But also, if you look at the Big Ten, 8 of the from 110 to 131 in terms of least penalized opponents are Big Ten teams in conference play. So it's like the Big Ten is not throwing as many flags as other conferences, and they're throwing even fewer against Ohio State's opponents. And I'm not saying the refs are this, the refs that. I'm just telling you some of the stats. And also we can see Jeremiah Smith being held and pushed and things like that in games. So I'm not saying call it both ways. I'm saying Davison and Igbinosun maybe only interfere as much as everybody else is interfering. Don't interfere so much as you have been. But also, after those first 2, then he gave up a catch, not a deep catch or anything like that, but it's like he was so off. It felt like he was just I'm almost like passive aggressive, like, fine, I'm not going to defend anybody. And, that's not the way to play corner, but that's what it kind of looked like.
Well, yeah, that was, if I'm thinking of the same one that you are, was Indiana was backed way up and they dropped back and just threw one. And you could almost read the intention there, which was, well, either this guy's going to be playing way off and this is going to be easy completion, or he's going to be right up on him and maybe get another pass interference call, because they threw that one, they completed it for 9. And then I think they went after him again on the next one. And that one, the throw was out of bounds and he had pretty good coverage and it didn't get called for anything. But yeah, like I said, teams know it, officials know it, everybody knows it. And so you've got to be able to figure it out so that does not become a recurring issue, because you can't have 45 yards of penalties a game. That can't happen. You can't have 15 yards of penalties every game. That can't happen, because you're going to be facing better players as you move on to the season. Oregon is coming, assuming they handle business this weekend. Oregon's coming a week from now. And then after that, you're facing whoever you're facing. You're facing some better offenses than Purdue and Northwestern. So you got to get that figured out now. And if they get through and they can get through the Big Ten championship game, you have a month to work on this stuff. So you have an opportunity to sort of address things in more detail. But you got to get through this weekend, and then you got to get through potentially the next weekend as well before you can do that. So
I will say one last thing on IGB. I do like the fact that he can be penalized twice, can then give up a catch, and then get one thrown out of bounds. Be like, you're not completing that one on me.
Yeah, the corner attitude never leaves. That's something that will never change. How about this one on Indiana's first touchdown? I was way at the other end of the field and did not notice that it was a direct snap to Ty Lawson and not to Curtis Rourke. And I watched that on the rewatch, and I went back and watched it again, and I thought, I bet Michigan is taking notes right now. This feels like something that, or has Michigan been planning to do this and then thought, you sons of guns, Kurt Signetti, you stole our plan. That just feels like in a game where Michigan's going to probably have to get a little bit creative to win in the red zone. That might be something Ohio State sees again this week. And you might see that once. And then the next time you see it, Kalel Mullings, we have seen him throw a pass against Ohio State before with great success in 2022. You might see that as well.
Was that Kellel Mullings? Was that direct snap or was that handed to him and then he ran towards the line and threw it?
I believe that was handed to him and he ran towards the line and did the jump pass. Yeah.
So what is more unlikely or what would be more of a surprise for Alex Orji to be the direct snap recipient and have him throw, or Kellel Mullings or Benjamin Hall or Donovan Edwards to be the direct snap recipient and have that guy throw? Like one of those, I don't know if it'll be a direct snap, but one of those is one of those guys is throwing the ball in this one. I feel like it's a virtual certainty.
I just want to, I'm glad you said that and got that on the record before we do the bold prediction show, because you were absolutely not getting any points for any of those people throw a forward pass in the game. At this point, what's the difference between Alex Orji and Kellel Mullings and Donovan Edwards? They're all running backs. That's what they are. And sometimes running backs throw pass, but that's, Alex Orji not playing last week, you might as well chalk it up to Tony Alford's running back rotation. It's just, that's what he is. So why would he not sort of fall into that same bucket? You're going to see something. You just sort of have to be on your P's and Q's, as my grandmother and curiously also a bunch of college football players now will say. So yeah, it's going to be something to watch for sure over the weekend. But yeah, I'm fully expecting Kellel Mullings to play as big a role as Michigan possibly can have him play during the game.
One of the guys that will be tasked with stopping that is Sonny Styles, who has continued to progress and ramp up, and he's reading things so well. He's getting into the backfield. He's making plays that end up in incompletions. Like they don't end up in the stat sheet. Like he's reading the flats and he's blowing that up before it gets an opportunity to get going. He's tackling the ball in the backfield. He's covering a guy that is as an outlet. And that's what a lot of Michigan's offense is. And so this is kind of what he's made for. So this is going to be his biggest test yet in terms of all of the different assignments that he's going to have or could be used in, whether that's also Colston Loveland or Marlon Klein or Donovan Edwards, getting matched up in all these different areas. He is a unique guy. I don't think you want to put him on Colston Loveland much, but things can be manipulated and he can be put in situations. I mean, he was in the slot last year and he did what he did. And now he seems this is the most comfortable. And what I don't want to do is like, every time we talk to him, so are you feeling more comfortable now? It's like, we can just leave this alone. He's playing better and better and better, as you would expect. He's comfortable. He's moving well. He's not as maybe early in the season, there's more thinking. Now he's reacting. He's moving with the running backs into the flats when they go, because he knows that's where the ball is going. He's reading a wide receiver screen that he blew up and got in between two offensive linemen that both were trying to take him down, and he got to the ball. Doing really, really well. And as much as Michigan will do screens and do short passes, he's going to be involved, I think, quite a bit next week.
Absolutely. Yeah. It feels, I watch these games back to back. I watched the Michigan Northwestern game and then the Ohio State Indiana game. And after watching Michigan, Michigan basically has like circles on the field where they're going to throw the ball. It's like, well, the running back runs here and you throw the ball here. And then the tight end, well, you throw that a little further down the field. The circle's a little further down the field. Sonny Styles is making a lot of plays in those areas. And when you look, coming into the season, I think we talked about the linebacker position being, the linebacker room being one of the biggest question marks on the team. Who was going to step up there? Who was going to play well? You felt pretty good about Cody Simon coming into the year as a veteran guy who had started before and had shown pretty well even coming into the season. And he's lived up to the billing and more, as Cody Simon has. But Sonny Styles has really, you have seen him grow and progress so quickly this year and come so far this year. You got to remember, he did not move over to the linebacker room until this spring. I think he even didn't he start at safety this spring for the first practice or two? It was not, there was conversation about the fact that might be the best thing for him, would be to move a little closer to the line of scrimmage. And there was a month or two, it felt like, of off season where he had not done it. And I don't remember if it was before the first day of practice, spring practice, or, a week into spring practice. But either way, this is not something he's been doing for 10 years. This is not, he hasn't been a linebacker since he was in third grade. He has been really learning on the fly to a certain degree this year. But we talk all the time about the light coming on for guys.
Mm-hmm.
You can see when the light came on for him, because he started the season and it was kind of like, yeah, it's got some athleticism. You can sort of see what they want to do with him. And then partway through the season, it was just kind of like, oh yeah, he's now making all these plays. And the linebackers on the whole, they probably missed a tackle or two. I know there was one that Simon missed in the middle of the line at one point, but the tackling has been pretty good. The awareness has been pretty good. The aggressiveness has been pretty good. You see him. Sonny Styles is not coming downhill quite the way that Caleb Downs is, because Downs is coming from more depth, but Styles flies around and makes a lot of those Caleb Downs type plays. And anytime you're doing anything Caleb Downs type on the Ohio State defense, that's a good thing.
Yeah, it was interesting. There were a couple of times where a play gets made and the jersey number is kind of crumpled. And I had a couple of people was like, was that Caleb or is that Sonny? And really, when you're saying, no, that was Sonny, it's like, oh, wow, okay, that's tremendous for him. That's really good. And he's making those plays. There was, on that Cody Simon missed tackle, I assume it's that one, which should have been a tackle for loss. I don't know if it was on Twitter or on a message board. I saw somebody say, like, Cody Simon is so soft. It's like, have you not watched anything to this point that it's, Anyway, let's not derail this. Let me see. How about one other thing? Indiana came into this game throwing all kinds of back shoulder throws. They only threw one in this one. Jim Knowles talked earlier in the week about, hey, how do you stop those? Like, well, we've got a plan. We're not going to tell you what it is. I think the plan worked, and part of the plan was getting after the quarterback, and that will continue to be the case this weekend against Michigan's tackles and Davis Ward, who's going to try to get the ball out as quickly as possible. And then Ohio State just has to tackle the ball. And I don't expect too many back shoulder throws with Michigan either. Tom, I'm not sure if we've seen a single back shoulder throw to a wide receiver more than 12 yards downfield this year from Michigan.
Yeah, you said that, and then I thought, oh boy, I'm sure there's been one, and I think of one off the top of my head. There was a nice play that Davis Warren made against Northwestern, where he was scrambling. He was extending a play with his legs, a little JJ McCarthy style, extending the play with your legs, kind of running to the sideline, and then he hit Frederick Moore on a pass, and that was like I think it was you could call that back shoulder, I guess. It was thrown away from the defensive end. It was thrown behind the receiver, but sort of intentionally. So we can give him credit for that. I don't know if it was 12 yards downfield. I suspect it probably was not. Yeah. So, all right. So I guess that one doesn't count. But yeah, I mean, the Ohio State's plan for keeping Indiana from being able to make back, fancy back shoulder throws was, let's see you do that from face down on the ground, college boy. And the plan worked pretty well, because they got after Curtis Rourke. And just rewatching that game, like, man, watching it live, I remember asking you, I don't know if those were on the post-game show or just while we were, chit-chatting at some point, how many sacks did they have? Because it felt like about 8. And the answer was 5. And I thought, oh, okay, well, 5. And then rewatching the game, I was like, no, this still feels like about 8 sacks. Like, it felt like, they got after Indiana, and there was just, Kurt Cignetti said it after the game, anytime they dropped back, it felt like something bad was about to happen. It was just this like looming, the music starts playing in a minor key on a violin in a minor key. And it's like, don't open that door. Jack Sawyer's back there. Cody Simon's back there. Don't do that. Don't go upstairs. That's where JT Tuimoloau is. No, that was the Indiana pass game on Saturday. And, I don't think you're going to have to expend quite that much effort to limit Michigan's passing game. Michigan has done a pretty good job of that all by themselves this season. But I'm sure that getting pressure will be a part of that game plan again for the Buckeyes on Saturday. You mentioned earlier Caleb Downs and Sonny Styles having jersey numbers that look similar. when crumpled, and guys who have been making a lot of plays. Lathan Ransom's number 8 looks kind of similar to a 2 or a 6 as well. He had, I don't think we even talked about this play on the post-game show.
Mm-hmm.
It was one I remember. An Indiana running back has the ball. Ransom comes downhill and just like flying with his fist, just punches the ball directly out. It was just like, it was, I don't even know how to explain it. It was like Superman flying through the air and just fist first right through the football, punches it out. And the reason this was not a bigger play was because it looked like Ohio State was going to recover it. And then somehow they had guys there and didn't end up kind of reeling it in, and Indiana offensive lineman kind of fell on it. And, it was not a drive that went anywhere. So it wasn't like, oh boy, this was a bad play that they should have made that ended up hurting him. And it was not a turnover. So it wasn't a good play. It was just sort of a forgotten play, but they work on punching that ball out. That's something that we see them work on in spring practice. They work on punching the ball out. They work on recovering fumbles. They work on, if there's a player from the other team there, you fall on it. If there's not a player there, you scoop it and you run. That's like day 1, day 2 of spring practice. They're working on that stuff, which means they're still working on stuff. You're still going back to that stuff throughout the course of the year. And now you're seeing it on the field.
Yeah, they call that the peanut punch. It's from Charles Peanut Tillman, former Bears corner, who kind of he just made it more famous, even though they've been doing it since forever, basically. A lot of punching back in the 50s and the 60s in the NFL, if you've ever watched. But Lathan Ransom leading the Big Ten in forced fumbles with 3 this year. So this is not the first time he's done that, and he finds the football. I can't believe Cody Simon didn't come up with that one, because he landed right on it. And then watching it from the press box, he's like, oh, Cody Simon's got that. And it's like, why are people still going after the ball? Clearly Cody Simon has it. And he did not. One of my last ones here, Tom, is the gravitational pull around Jeremiah Smith, whether that is he's in the red zone, especially on the TreVeyon Henderson touchdown run to the left side. You've got Jeremiah Smith way on the right. He's got a corner over him, and he's got a safety over there as well. And it's like those 2 guys are no longer in the picture. And so then it becomes basically 9-on-9 at that point, or 10-on-9, however you want to do it. And you've got a numbers advantage. There was another, the touchdown catch by Emeka Egbuka. They showed it on the Fox replay, where Jeremiah just, takes the safety and takes another defender with them, takes the corner with them, and leaves Emeka with a linebacker. Just the amount of, as Jeremiah's numbers dropped, he had just 3 catches in this one. Everybody else is being enhanced. And really that is the mark of a guy with a gravitational pull, basically. And the defense is looking at him and look over here, and then boom, there goes the ball. And Ohio State's doing well with that.
Yeah, he finished 3 catches, 34 yards. But, the one that you mentioned with the TreVeyon Henderson run, that one happened right in front of me. He was lined up directly in front of me. And I thought, oh boy, here comes the fade to Jeremiah Smith. And they, then all of a sudden I see a safety coming in, and it was like the corner was going to take away the fade, and the safety was coming inside to take away the slant. And I was like, well, I don't think he's going to run a streak. If he does, I hope he catches it quickly and can stop quickly, because otherwise he's going to run over my face, which would be not great. So yeah, he is someone who is making an impact for this offense without touching the ball. That's really impressive. And they're still finding ways to get him involved. They ran an end around to him to get a first down at one point in the red zone. They're going to find ways to get him the ball. One of his catches, he had 2 guys on him again. The safety kind of slipped slightly, but head higher. That's just throw it up and he'll go up and get it. And he's going to win those high ones more often than not. But yeah, I think you come out of the gates, and I'm sure Indiana's going, okay, where's number 4? Like find number 4. Well, then Carnell Tate has 4 catches for 56 or 58 yards on that opening drive alone, or on that second drive. It wasn't the opening drive, the second drive. He's pulling safeties, he's pulling corners, he's pulling all sorts of eyeballs, and that's opening things up for everyone else. So yeah, that for sure was a big thing that doesn't show up in the box score, but ends up making a big impact on the field. I had that Cardinal Tate and all 4 catches being on the same drive. That was my last note that I had. I'm just scrolling through the
How about
Michigan. Go ahead.
TreVeyon Henderson running really hard? There was a play where he just like threw his body into like he was about to get tackled. He's like, I'm just gonna throw my body into this dude and see what happens. And he's just running really hard. And I know Ryan Day talked about it after the game, but you watch him, and we say it every week. Like these two guys, Quinshon Judkins and TreVeyon Henderson, have been so good for each other. They feed off of each other, and it's almost like they have this competition to run harder than the other, and everybody is benefiting from that, other than the linebackers who are getting knees to the face.
Well, and there was last week, and I'm gonna see if I can find. I don't think I'm gonna be able to find the picture in time. I think there was a run on the sideline that would have been at the bottom half of the TV screen where I think it was TreVeyon, where he either had a run or a pass. This was in the Northwestern game. And someone's coming up to tackle him right on the sideline, and he could have stepped out if he wanted to, but he just absolutely laid his shoulder into the guy. And they just it was probably kind of like a stalemate. But it was just, and then he ended up getting shoved out by the other guy who was also right there. So he didn't even get anything out of it. But he's kind of embracing the contact this year, which if you don't have the kind of wear and tear on your body, you probably have a little more leeway to do that. And that I think includes also stuff like blitz pickup. His blitz pickup has been so much better this year. His blocking, we've seen the talk, the conversations about how well the running backs are blocking on like the quarterback sweep plays and that kind of stuff. I think that's all sort of part of the same conversation. And I think it all does trace back to, look, I mean, if you're really kind of bruised and battered, you might not be quite as willing to throw your face in somewhere if you're already, at 75%. I don't know what percent these guys are at right now. No one is at 100% this time of the season. I can tell you that with 100% certainty. But if you're feeling better than you did at this point in previous seasons, you're probably going to be a little bit more willing to sort of throw your body around and make an impact one way or another.
Last thing for me, Tom, we've had the Michigan game going on in the background, Ohio State versus Michigan. Buckeyes won it. Tell me what you think. 41-6. And Will Howard, 384 yards passing, 4 touchdowns.
I will probably take the under on the passing yardage. I will probably take the under on the Ohio State team total. I will probably take the over on the Michigan team total. 4 passing touchdowns. You could see 4 passing touchdowns for Ohio State. I think.
I'm seeing what Jeremiah did.
Want to give me the rushing yards per carry for the two teams?
Yeah. It was 22 for 42 for Michigan. And 33 for 142 if Ohio State does 33 for 142 and 2 touchdowns, that feels like a win. 4.3 yards per carry. Yes.
Yeah. And that's it. Like that's 4.3 yards per carry. That's what they need to do. They don't need, I said 3.8 earlier, but that's kind of what they need, is just kind of run well enough to kind of keep things moving. If Michigan runs 22 times for 42 yards, I don't know how they got the 6 points with 22. I mean, maybe you got a turnover very deep in, maybe it was a defensive score and you missed the PAT, although I don't really see that happening with Dominic Zavada. I mean,
2 field goals.
2 field goals. Okay. Well, maybe they got 2 turnovers deep in the Ohio State end. I don't know. That's, 22 carries for 42 yards for Michigan. If that happens, oh boy, that's a, that's a
41-6.
Well, it might, if it's 22 for 42, it might be worse than 41-6. I'm absolutely not expecting 22 for 42 for Michigan on the ground. I think they're going to be able to move the ball on this Ohio State defense to a certain degree. But if Ohio State outrushes Michigan by like 2 yards a carry, that is just going to be like the elevator scene in The Shining. It's just going to be just a wall of blood everywhere. I would strongly advise Michigan to not get outrushed by 2 yards per carry.
Will Howard, 9 rushes, 88 yards, take it to the bank. So
400 and what, 70, 60 yards, something like that of total offense for him. That's
not bad.
Tony, I will go so far as to say if they do that, I think they have a 50% or better chance to win.
Here you go. It was 104 yards receiving for Emeka Egbuka. For Cornell Tate, 96 for Emeka Egbuka, 99 for Jeremiah Smith. Spreading that ball around, just taking what the defense gives you. And honestly, that's not an outrageous line for what we might see. But we'll get there when we get there. Some silly video gamers are going to tell us how it's going to go. We're going to tell you how it's going to go. So go ahead and hit that thumbs up before we go. We would appreciate that if you're watching on YouTube. And go ahead and hit that bell to be notified. Subscribe to the channel if you've not yet done so. If you're listening on your audio podcast platform of choice, 5-star rating and review would be appreciated. And of course, always find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Sign up now, $4.99 for your first month. We got a lot of stuff planned for this month. So check in and say hello to us there. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys later.